everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the Geeking Out podcast. I am the Athletic Geek, and my guest this week is somebody who I had the pleasure of sitting next to at the NWA Empower pay-per-view. And found out that that he has his own podcast. He's written books. He's very active in the independent wrestling scene. My guest this week is Ehren Schaffter. Ehren, thanks so much for doing this. Sorry it took so long.
No, man, absolutely. I fully understand it, how hard it is to find time. Because, in podcasting, we have 1,000 things on our minds and trying to get it going. So thanks for having me on.
No problem. And a real life on top of that for everybody with 1,000 things going on, trying to actually be, like human beings outside of everything. But um, my first question for you is what got you interested and what made you a pro wrestling fan?
And it's the same thing a lot of our guests tell me is I came across pro wrestling as kind of an accident. I was probably about 6 years old and I was flipping through the television and NWA was on and Iceman King Parsons and Jimmy Boogie Woogie Man Valiant were on the television. And Jimmy Valiant was just such a, character. And I was just kind of mesmerized about this older looking guy and what this possibly could be. So I watched a few matches, and then when my parents got home, I thought I would be in trouble for watching it. So I hurried up and flipped the channel real fast. And later on that night, my dad was flipping through, and he stopped it on wrestling. And of course, my mom told him, "Hey, change the channel. He doesn't know anything about that." And I said, "Iceman King Parsons and Jimmy Boogie Woogie Man." And my dad said, "See, he knows." And then boom, ever since, that's how it's been.
So, would you say those are your favorite wrestlers, or who would go on to be
Oh
kind of
no,
like your favorite
I mean
wrestlers?
they probably wouldn't even be in my top, whatever. If I had to choose. No, Bret Hart is my favorite wrestler. Everyone who knows me knows I've always been a Bret guy. Of course, my co-host on my podcast, he's a big Sean guy. So there's always
I
that big.
always say that everybody, with the exception of like maybe two guests I've had from that are involved in wrestling, I'm a Sean guy, but everyone I get's a Bret Hart guy. So it's always like I'm always gonna be the odd man out, I guess.
Yeah, and I think what it is for me is he was the first person when I watched wrestling, I watched it for the art form and not the entertainment, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah, makes perfect sense. I totally get it. Um, so Brett's your all time favorite. Do you have a particular favorite Brett match?
Oh, my favorite Bret Hart match is one that a lot of people have not seen. It's from One Night Only, the UK pay per view against The Undertaker.
Undertaker. Yep, it's a good match. It's underrated.
Yes, it's
Underrated.
very underrated. And then, of course, you've got the Bret and Austin for Mania 13. So,
Yeah. So yeah, okay. I'm not I'm not the sort of Sean fan that won't give Brett credit. That's those are an underrated and a very and an all time great right there. So I'm definitely in agreement there. Do you have any memories of your first time that you ever went to a live pro wrestling show?
oh, absolutely. My local high school here and for anyone who doesn't know, I live in Sturgis, Kentucky. So the high school here is Union County High School. Jerry Lawler's USWA Old Memphis promotion that he used to be in for years used to run our high school, and I was able to watch Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty as the Midnight Rockers come through my high school, along with Jeff Jarrett just coming through and starting his career as well. Kane was just starting his career as well back in those days. So those are my first ever wrestling matches that I went to.
So you being kind of from the USWA territory, and after you just tell me you were Bret Hart's your all time favorite, how excited were you when Lawler went to WWF at the time and began a program with Bret Hart?
Well, I had high hopes for it. And then it became sort of a comedy act with the whole foot in my mouth. And then, of course, brought in Isaac Yankem. But I really think Jerry Lawler is probably one of the most underrated wrestlers in wrestling history because unless you lived in this area or the Midwest, you did not understand how big of a draw Jerry Lawler was and how important he was to a lot of people's careers. So yes, I had a lot of great hopes for it, but in the end, I think it kind of worked out the way it should. Because we got Jerry Lawler on the microphone for decades.
Yeah, that's very true. Um, I have a lot of listeners. It's funny you bring this up because I have a lot of listeners that obviously younger and didn't get to witness Lawler in his prime, and I have some that didn't necessarily grow up in kind of the USWA area, and they only know Jerry from being in the WWE, being puppies and the guy that just gets the guy that we have seen on Monday nights for the past for almost 30 years at this point. So it's just funny to say that because if you were to if one of those individuals from the West Coast or the East Coast or a younger fan that doesn't understand Lawler, how would you, as somebody that experienced Lawler in his territory, in his prime, try and sell Jerry Lawler to make them understand the King like the King?
He was as big as Hulk Hogan in the '80s in this area as a babyface. You want to talk about a white hot babyface? It was Jerry the King Lawler. And I know a lot of people know him as a heel, but white face, white hot, Jerry the King Lawler would rival right there with Hulk Hogan as far as pops, uh, selling out the Memphis Coliseum. They would run the circuit every single week. It would absolutely be the same. They'd hit Evansville, Indiana every Wednesday night. They go down to Knoxville, hit up Nashville. But man, oh man, could that guy draw some great heat from the crowd anytime he was taking a tail kicking.
What? Okay, I was gonna say, what was it about Jerry Lawler that you think resonated with everybody so much that, for whatever reason, maybe didn't translate to the WWF?
This
And
wasn't a knock on Lawler, it's his physique. There's nothing special about Jerry the King Lawler as far as the look. He looks like just an average guy that you would see out on the street. He's never been that buff guy, big and tall. He looked like your average Joe. He looked like a hardworking guy. I think that resonated with a lot of people.
awesome. You have a favorite Jerry Lawler match from USWA territory?
Oh man, him and Bill. If anybody doesn't know, him and Superstar Bill Dundee just had some classics. It's really hard to tell. And then Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert, his stuff with Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert was really good as well. To say an actual particular match, ooh, that would be tough because they wrestled each other 700 times. I bet you.
Did you ever get to go to the Mid South Coliseum?
I did not get to go to Mid South Coliseum.
Damn. Um, okay, so you're big wrestling fan. How do you carry this wrestling fandom with you as you grow up? Or was there ever like any I'm kind of over that. Like, how did you take wrestling with you into your adult life?
I try to pass it along to my kids. And there for a while, my son from the ages of 5 to 10 was really all about it. Yeah, and I think that's something that we all kind of want to do. We want to find something that we can do with our kids a lot, and watching wrestling was one of them. But I'm telling you, the products now, it's really hard to stay invested as much. And I think a lot of it has to do with the social media aspect of it.
Okay, that's interesting because I hear everybody, because kind of I feel that way about one promotion right now, but there's other promotions out there that you know I'm excited to watch wrestling again. So it's interesting you say that. What do you think is you said you mentioned social media, but like, what is that that you feel's taking away from pro wrestling from all across the board right now?
you don't have to watch it live anymore. I mean, that's the biggest thing. If I want to watch what happened on Monday night or Wednesday night, well, I can just go to YouTube 2 or 3 days later and watch it. It's there for me. The same thing with, if I want to go back and watch an old Shawn Michaels match, I could throw it into YouTube. I can even go to WWE Network and I can watch it at any time. Growing up, you had to be there on Monday nights to watch it. You had to be there on if Tuesday Night Thunder was going on to watch it. Maybe you didn't, but you had to throw in a VCR tape and record it. And I think that's really hurt professional wrestling. People don't can go on about their normal life now, and through the means of social media or through the means of all these streaming devices, it's kind of hurt the wrestling business as much as they would like to think it's helped it.
Interesting. Do you have any particular favorite wrestlers you like to watch now, or are you sort of disenfranchised with wrestling? What's your favorite thing about the current wrestling product? In con-
I do.
in opposition to what you feel is kind of taking away from the current product.
Okay, so let's be honest. I think you're going to probably feel the way I do. And WWE is very hard to watch right now. Is that correct?
I can agree with that. If anyone listening is a WWE fan, I'm not bashing them, but yeah,
Right.
I can't get through it.
Yeah, I mean, there's still the major leagues of professional wrestling. Let's be honest, they still are.
I've compared them 1,000 times over on this podcast, my live stream. They're McDonald's. They are the McDonald's of wrestling.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I got you on that. So for me, the thing is that I love getting the old NXT. I loved it. I love that total direction that they were going. And I'm not trying to bash the NXT 2.0. I see what they're doing. It's just I wish that more promotions would continuously keep me invested in certain people. If it's not broke, don't fix it.
Okay. You have an example of something that you were invested in lately that you lost investment in?
Every single person called up from NXT.
Fair enough. There you go. Um, we met at an NWA show. There's the NWA nowadays. There's AEW. Impact's getting some buzz again. Um, New Japan Pro Wrestling has an audience in the United States. What is your opinion of all those other promotions? Are those? I mean, I know. Obviously, you like NWA because I met you at an NWA show. But what is your opinion on the NWA and the other promotions? Do you enjoy them? Do you think something's missing? What's your opinion on those products?
I enjoy them all. And I think it's because each one of those promotions has talent that works tremendously hard and keeps me invested. Now, when you talk about New Japan, let's be honest, New Japan has really fallen off
Oh yes,
from their big height, which was about 4 to 5 years ago.
or even
I
just
mean,
3 years ago.
yes, I mean, they were like the cream of the crop. You were thinking it was WWE and it was New Japan. But what happened is those American wrestlers, the Omegas and the Bucks, formed AEW, and that really hurt New Japan. They have a tough time making new stars in professional wrestling. I
See,
think that's why they keep going back to Okada a lot.
well, I'm gonna agree with you impartial on that one. Um, I do believe that the AEW formation obviously did hurt New Japan because now kind of the thing that was sort of spearheading that was gone. But I think at the same time, a lot of us that really got into New Japan, like I started watching for AJ Styles, but then I saw Naito and Ibushi and Suzuki and Tanahashi, and like, okay, in my personal opinion, and we're gonna get back on the interview for everybody that doesn't want to hear a soapbox that you hear every stream, so don't worry. Um, I feel like it became almost they became too obsessed with finding a good gaijin that
Right.
sometimes they would, you know, not they would make it seem like they don't want to they don't always want to make it seem like the Japanese wrestlers were important to the American audience. So they had wrestlers that, in my opinion, aren't the best getting, kind of in the main event because, well, it's it's a Caucasian individual, and they have that Bullet Club logo on them. So hey, this guy's good, right? When it's like me, who like follow New Japan, and maybe it may be different for other people. I'm going to point that out there. Was beginning to feel like, okay, so I'm supposed to care about this guy. Like I want to see like these three Japanese talent that transcend language barriers get their opportunity, but you're going with like all these gaijins. I don't
Yeah.
want that. I can watch NXT and get that, you know. So that's my. I do feel that like the Bucks and Kenny leaving hurt, but I feel like Kenny more so than the Bucks. The Bucks leaving New Japan, take or leave, but like Kenny did, hurt a little bit because he was a very creative guy. Sorry for that tangent, listeners.
No, you're good. You're good. And then when it comes to Impact, I would love, and I've said this on our podcast, I would love for Impact to, I mean, if we're going to go for it, let's go for it. Empty the bank, get Braun Strowman, get Bray Wyatt, get Bronson Reed, get, everyone that's sitting out there, Buddy Murphy, get them right now. Because unfortunately, when it comes to Impact, as good as these guys are, the Eddie Edwards and the Eric Youngs, I don't see them as main event game changers.
Right.
I was happy with Josh Alexander winning the belt, and then because I thought there was something there with him, and I've really believed that for a while. But then you just dropped it right back to Moose, and now I'm not going to give any spoilers away, but he's not even
By the
going to
time
be wrestling.
by the time this airs, like it should be known.
Okay, and so and who's the first guy that's going to get a shot at Moose? Well, it's Eddie Edwards again. Why? Why can we not break this cycle? NWA, I love the women's show. I mean, we were there.
Yes.
It felt like such a special night. And I remember telling Mickey James the next day that I was at Mania 22 when she won the title. And I told her, I said, I was at Mania 22 when you won the title. But there was just something about the night before. That women's night, it was just special. It didn't have the greatest matches ever, but it was just special. And on the men's side of that, I think NWA needs a few bigger pieces to make me care a little bit more.
I gotcha. Now I will say this. I feel like they did a damn good job in that main event because, and Trevor Murdoch's a great talent. Don't get me wrong, but
Right.
I never cared about Trevor Murdoch. I was screaming my lungs out for Trevor Murdoch in that match. Just that's how fucking good that match was the next night. But I see what you're saying because I get the criticism of the NWA being, okay, so it's just it's a bunch of people from 15 years ago, except for like
Right.
Aldous, I get that criticism, but I also I mentioned other people that from other areas that might be listening. I just know of people that are like they don't like the old school look of the show. I'm not saying that's right or wrong or having the old school look. I love it, but they go like they grew up in the Attitude Era. They want pyro. They want a big building. They want a big set, and whenever they see two people at a walk into a little desk and 50 people in the crowd, I think awesome. It looks like the kind of wrestling that looks old school, and that's neat. Other people might see it going, oh, well that's lame. That's Bush League. So,
But I think you got to have a good mixture of that, and that's the one thing that NWA on the male side is missing, that young talent with the new talent. I think MLW does a great job with that. They're small time, and they seem to do a great job. Ring of Honor is, not as big as it once was, and they do a great job of bringing some older people back and mixing it with the new. I just think that you've got to have that good mixture.
and finally, what do you think of just AEW? Before we get back to your journey?
I mean, they're exciting. There's no doubt about it. Um, I wish that they would quit signing every single person released by WWE
Thank you.
and go back to developing the people like the Orange Cassidys and the Darby Allens and the Hangman Pages, like we were supposed to do, and we were, that was the whole thing with them, is they were going to be that promotion, and they started pushing those people, but of course these other people like Adam Cole's and Daniel Bryan's and Punk's fall into their lap.
I mean, you gotta
And
get some of those guys. You gotta sign them if they're coming.
right,
Punk and
you
Bryan in
do,
particular.
but
I've been
it's
as critical too, but even if you got a quarterback, if Tom Brady's looking for a job, you got to listen to what he's got to say. you know.
oh 100%. But it's hard to push everyone at the same time. Like if I'm them, I kind of do like what Punk's doing. Okay, he's staying away from the main event type scene. He's seeming like he wants to work with the younger talent. That's great. That's what Punk should be, unless you're going to build to one big, huge match later on.
Right.
But Malachi Black for me is where it's at. He was where it was at for me in the WWE, and they couldn't do nothing with him there. So we'll see what happens, with him and Andrade and talent like that. Are they just going to get pushed back further, or are they going to bring them more to the forefront?
So we've just gone on a great tangent, but a tangent, with just showing how much we look into wrestling and we respect wrestling. When did you kind of start looking at wrestling differently? I mean, you mentioned that Brett, made you look at pro wrestling as an art form. Was there ever kind of the moment where you had that transition between, yay, I want this guy to win because I'm a fan, to like looking at it in the quote unquote smart way? Was there a moment? Was there a newsletter? Was there a website? What made you become kind of the fan like we are right now?
I just think it was the transition into the attitude era of pro wrestling. A little bit earlier from 95 on, they went away from the big giant people I'm not trying to get on a tangent about Hulk Hogan. He was what professional wrestling needed when it needed it. But when you started watching people put out 20-minute matches, and it was very intriguing to me, and then the infusion of people like an Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio, and I'm just going to tell you, it may have been watching Rey Mysterio versus Psychosis and ECW,
Okay.
where I was like, what in the world is going
How'd
on
you find
here?
ECW? Because I couldn't find ECW until they went to TNN.
Yep. I had a sports package that was on my Direct TV or Dish Network at the time, and they would show it at 1:30 in the morning on like MSG
Okay.
station. And so I'd set the recorder in and I would record it. And I just remember watching that like, who are these? What in the world is this stuff? What is going on here? Because to that point, we were still watching these matches where a body slam would pin somebody. And now I'm seeing the spot fest start to take place. And I was like, man, these guys can really wrestle.
Awesome. So the ones that really attracted you to ECW at first was the luchadors they were bringing in, or did you have any of the uh, quote unquote originals capture your imagination then?
Now, I was reading about ECW in like Pro Wrestling Illustrated, and I was like, what is this promotion? What is going on? Like, because you would just see blood. And that's something that you didn't see in WWE a lot. So I was like, something's crazy here. And so I finally found it after probably about a year of reading about it, learning about Shane Douglas, learning about Tommy Dreamer, Raven. And sure enough, I fell in love with ECW.
Awesome. So when do you take this passion and decide to do more with it than just be a fan? I know, back in that period of time, podcasting was unheard of. So, but when did you decide you wanted to do more than just be a pro wrestling fan? Was that, right away, or was that because of, the internet and computers and technology? When did you decide to do more than just be a fan?
Yeah, in early 1999 and 2000, me and a group of guys started our own little website. We called it Cheap Pop Wrestling, uh, and we would just do recaps of things that would happen on Monday night and Thursday night. I don't know how many people ever really clicked on our website. Probably not a lot, but we'd just write like little guest columns and things such that our opinions on what was going on. And then probably around 2004, we just kind of stopped doing that type of stuff. Um, Fast forward just a little bit, I had this idea for a book, and it ended up being 15 years later before I wrote it. But I went to Dave Metzler, and he posted I was looking for some people for a book that would tell their life stories in wrestling and their journeys. And I wanted to focus on independent wrestlers, and I chickened out. I didn't end up going through with it. I had probably about 110 emails at the time from people interested in it, and I just didn't do it. And then, of course, 2 years ago, I opened up those emails from then, and it really upset me because I had emails from people like Seth Rollins, and I had people like John Moxley, Shark Boy, uh, all these people ended up being pretty darn good talents, and I passed up on telling their stories early on, and I was like, never again. I'm gonna do it. So went back to Dave Metzler. He posted out there. I was looking again, and sure enough, my email box just started overflowing. So
Um, so what's it like trying to get a book published and write a book? I know, like, it's got to be a lot more difficult than what it seems. How hard is it to reach out to these wrestlers? How hard is it to get it published? I know now we have crowdfunding, but what is the stress of trying to put a book together like?
well, for independent road, there was a lot of stress, and because I am someone who I feel like I have good standards and morals. And when I was going through the whole process, right at that time, there was a lot of the Me Too movement starting, and there
Right.
was a lot of wrestlers being accused of things. Um, and I'm not going to get into whether it's true or not because I don't know. I wasn't there, but combing through those and then doing the research on these wrestlers to make sure they're not one of these people because I'm not putting someone in my book that's like that. I'm
Right.
not going to. But I found it pretty easy. Like I said, a lot of the wrestlers came to me and said, here's my resume. I'd be interested. Some of them said, hey, I definitely would be interested. And this is how much money I want. And then another one was like, I want 75% of your book sales if I'm in it. And, I just sit down and thought about it. And I said, I'm going to choose those who are wanting me to tell their stories, who don't care about getting any money, who want people to learn about them. And so there were a few people I did email myself. Uh, and I got some good, strong feedback from some people. Jeff Jarrett declined. Uh, Matt Cardona and Brian Myers both emailed me back and they declined. And all of them were respectfully declined. TJP was also someone who declined. Um, so I felt like I was going in the right direction with it. I just needed to kind of cipher through some people. And then there were some people that fell out, and it's tough because it is the wrestling business. And some of them were getting signed. There are people who I did interview who didn't make the book because they end up signing with a big contract. And I had to refocus my energy then. And to be honest with you, I'm perfectly fine with that because I want to see all these men and women succeed. But it was a process of stopping and then going back, stopping and going back. So it is a very long, tedious process. I think people don't understand it's if you've got a niche that speaks volumes to people, it's not hard for someone to want to publish your book.
Right.
But I got a buddy right now who's interested in writing about Bigfoot. I think he'll have no trouble getting that book published. There are so many people who want to know about Bigfoot.
Right.
But if you're trying to write a story about, going fishing and a boy falling into a lake, it's probably not going to reach the masses. And I think that's where a lot of the books, I think people in the book industry right now want to help push out books. Everything's kind of going digital and going away from actually reading actual copies of books. So they're all about trying to get print out there. And it's a little bit easier than people think.
Just a real quick sidebar. You mentioned, people like Jeff Jarrett and TJP declining. Just as someone who, when you reach out to someone to try and work on something, getting the respectful no thank you feels a million times better than being ignored, does it not?
Oh, 100%. I've always told people, like, if you don't want to do something, I'm okay with it. And it's like that even on the podcast. If you don't want to be on our podcast, I 100% understand it. I appreciate you for taking the time to read it. It's an honor that you would even read this message. And I always start off every email like that. First and foremost, I appreciate your time to even read this message. I start every email off like that because it's a blessing. And as well as I do, we get ghosted quite a bit.
Oh yeah. Um, you don't have to mention any names, but you mentioned the ghosting, and it's the worst feeling in the world. Do you have a particular? You have to mention names, but do you have a particular like just fuck kind of ghosting story that really, that you can laugh at now, but that really kind of got to you? And then on the flip side, do you have like a particular? We're kind of transitioning more to talking about podcasting, but one where you're like, I'm gonna shoot the shot, and then they go, yeah, let's be on the podcast. You're like, holy shit, I got this person. You know what I mean?
Yes, we had it set up where someone from, and I won't mention the name, but a talent that is wrestling for OVW. For everyone who don't know, that's Ohio Valley Wrestling. Was going to be on our show, and Tom and I were pretty excited to talk to this person. Um, and they just didn't show up. And that's happened before too. Sometimes people get the time difference, the time change wrong. It's happened. So I reached out and just said, we're on. Hopefully we didn't get the time mixed up, but if we did, I apologize. Love to get it set back up again. And they had their read receipts on and they read it and they didn't respond. So about an hour or two later, after me and Tom went ahead and finished the show, I sent him another message. Said, I just want to let you know, I surely hope everything's okay with you and nothing has happened. Please just let us know that you're all right, and hoping for the best and we can reschedule. They read it again, never responded.
Ooh.
And it's just like, but at the same time, you're seeing them post all over social media. And that right there does rub me the wrong way. Because, like I said, if you don't want to be on, that's fine. If something happened, that's fine too. But just
Right.
communicate it,
Exactly.
because you said it at the very beginning. We have other lives. We schedule these shows and these podcasts around our family time, around our shoot jobs. And for me to sit there for an hour and a half or an hour just waiting for someone just to say something, do the common courtesy thing.
Now we've
And
heard.
then whenever you're,
Oh, go.
go
No,
ahead.
I was gonna say, you had more of that story. I was getting ready to say, like, all right, now tell me, let's end on something good. Tell me something good about one
Oh,
where
and,
you.
and then of course, we shot the shot with Thunder Rosa. We shot the shot right the day of all the rumors at that time were floating around that either she was going to go to AEW or she was going to go to WWE. Right when she was red hot. And I was like, I'm just going to shoot this shot. And sure enough, boom, she responded. She was on the show like the next night. And
That's
that's
awesome.
one of them where I'm just like, did that really just happen?
um,
Because you don't think that's going to happen, but sometimes
right.
it does.
Um, so have you ever had to pay for an interview? Have you ever like reached out to someone and they've had to say, "I'd love to do it, but it'll cost blank"? And likewise, have there ever been somebody where you've reached out and you're like, you know what, I want to listen to what they have to say so much. How do I send
Oh
you the
yeah,
money?
yeah, absolutely. We've when we were first getting going, there was some names, and we were struggling at first because we didn't have a name. And for anyone knows, it's the Hot Tag Hooligans Wrestling Podcast Show, and we were kind of struggling. And someone said, "Yeah, I'll do it, $25." And I was just like, well, let's try it. Let's see what happens. And we got that guest on. But one thing that we've kind of started to do, uh, and I guess it's considered paying for talent, some promotions are coming to us and they're asking for a sponsorship for a match. And sometimes it may be they're asking for $150 and what you get in that is your name on the TV, on Fight TV, and it says that you're sponsoring a match, and you'll get a private message from wrestler A and 2 tickets to the show. Well, I don't live in New York. I can't make it to the show. So I reply back to these promotions and say, well, let's make a deal. How about I'll push your show nonstop on our podcast? You give me an interview with A, B, C, or D, and I will pay you $40. And almost every one of the promotions have agreed to it.
That's cool.
So, some of them are willing to work with and we've got a couple shows coming up for a promotion that we are helping sponsor now. Invictus.
If it's a positive thing and you want to mention, people that have worked well with you, please go ahead and put it out there because I'd love to. I'd love
Yeah,
to hear. I'd love to hear about good people that help people like us out in the wrestling business. So please.
yeah. Invictus Pro Wrestling is who we've partnered up with coming up. They've got a great show coming up on November 20th. Combat Fights Unlimited is another one that's very well. And then Grapple Hers was our first one that we kind of went out and kind of sponsored. And of course, it landed us Kylan King.
Oh
So
wow, that's awesome. Um, so you've written another book entitled "Loving Casey Nelson." Can you tell us a little bit about that book?
yeah, Loving Casey Nelson is up for the pre-order right now. It will drop next week. Totally, the sales right now are really good. Um, Around here where I live, and it's kind of like I know where you live as well. Um, Wrestling doesn't speak for everybody. I had so
Right.
many people tell me locally, "Well, I would have bought your book, but I don't like wrestling," and that did bug me just a little bit because I was just like, it's not about just wrestling, it's about people's lives. But everyone challenged me to do something that would speak to a larger mass. And what better way than to do a children's novel? I asked my daughter, who's 9, what's something that she would want to read about, and she said a girl being bullied. And so I went with that route. A girl whose father has passed away, she's grieving, she's unpopular, she's being bullied, and living in a small town community. And it's just about finding self love for yourself.
Okay. I probably should have asked you about this before we start talking about books, but were you ever like, did you go to school for writing? Did you ever like learn how to craft a story like on a higher education level, or was this just something that you had a knack for and you got everything together and you put it together and you've got two books out?
Okay, so I think this is like anybody. So when you're in school, we used to have to write these portfolio pieces. And I
Right.
don't know if you had to do those either. And I hated to write. Like I could not stand writing. But if it was something that interests me, like sports, I didn't care to maybe write a story as far as sports goes. So I joined the school newspaper and I would write articles as far as what happened with our local high schools sports games. My senior year, I became one of the editors of the school paper, and I actually received a scholarship for writing through the high school. I went on to Henderson Community College and wrote for their newspaper as well. And then about a year or two after that, I became the sports editor for the newspaper here where I live. And so that's how my writing journey kind of began. Um, and I think that's with a lot of people. A lot of people may not like certain things unless they find something that kind of interests them. And so sports interests me. Always played it, always coached it, and yet why not finally write about something I really love, pro wrestling?
Um, so when you were, writing sports, was there ever did you ever get any grief from like the other sports fans of, oh, it's not real, right? Or were they all pretty respectful of your wrestling passion?
I still get that.
Unfortunately, I don't know if that's ever going to go away. Unfortunately,
Yeah, we still get it with the podcast. They're, even with the podcast, like you do know it's not real, right? Like, oh my gosh, every movie you watch isn't real either.
exactly. I a friend of mine I did do some game streams with here on the channel. They would say like, that's not real, right? And I go like, hey, what's your favorite show? And they go like, oh, Game of Thrones. I'm like, those dragons are fake, right? They don't like it too much.
Yes, it's just crazy how you know this is my soap opera. And I told my
Right.
wife that when I missed her, when I first met her, it's like pro wrestling is my soap opera. You can watch your All My Children's and Your Days of Our Lives. Monday Night Raw is my soap opera. Let me have it.
Now has she ever come around on wrestling? I know she was there at the show with you. Was this kind of like an under duress thing, or have you been lucky enough to get her to kind of come around a little bit on pro wrestling?
Depends on what show it is. She loved that NWA show. And I'm not sure if it was because it was all women or not. A month prior, we had gone to another local show, and it had more of the redneck wrestling crowd
Gotcha.
there. So, the fans being more vocal, uh, where NWA had people really there and enjoying the show. You know how it is. You get the small town promotions, you've got the people in the crowd who are trying to be part of the show more than watch the show.
Right.
And she didn't enjoy that one as much. She enjoyed watching my daughter, who I took with us, more than the actual event. But when we went to NWA, she absolutely loved it. She thought it was very well done. The production was great. And then, of course, the next day, I think she enjoyed meeting the wrestlers just as well as far as the meet and greet. And of course, it was a weekend away, so
In a very bougie area of St. Louis. So
okay. So I've been to St. Louis a lot of times in my life. That was the first time I had been on that side of St. Louis.
same here, and I'm from the area. So like I never even fathom that. It's usually just kind of it's well, it's not even Scott.
Around yeah,
Yes,
around Bush Stadium.
Bush Stadium. It's not. It was Scottrade. I'm not a hockey fan, but it's whatever the Blues Stadium is. For the
Right.
wrestling events there, and then we go to the indie shows. Usually run suburban St. Louis. Quite a few of them in the Metro East Illinois area. So yeah, that was my first time ever seeing anything of that ever in St. Louis.
And you're right. It is such a nice area.
Oh yeah, it's
Uh,
I I felt like I was being stared at by the people that were actually just at the Chase Plaza for, their own business, or, staying there for the weekend, or, I'm there in a pink Chelsea green t-shirt and a pair of, cargo shorts and a ball cap on, and, here's somebody in a three-piece suit looking at me, and it's not one of the wrestlers. So
yeah, I mean, could you imagine booking that hotel? Because that hotel, I did look at that hotel when tickets went on sale, and I think it was like $499 a night. So can you imagine getting a $499 a night hotel, and everyone, there's like 1,000 people there with fanny packs and wrestling shirts.
I just um the only, sidebar, the only thing worse than that for me is about 4 years ago, 5 years ago at this point. Me and some friends, we went to Comic Con in Indianapolis, and we booked the Hilton Hotel because it was right across the street from the convention. And and it wasn't that much. It wasn't even as much money as the Chase. And we're all like trying to save money in any way we can. So we're like, we're having the bellhop take up our Budweiser racing cooler full of that we're using for beer and soda and food, and we have our secondary TV so we can game and all that, and everybody's looking at us like that. And then when Comic Con comes around, we're all in costume, and we're walking through this very fancy hotel in, like, in a Nightwing costume and a Hey Arnold costume. So that's the only thing I think that maybe could top that.
Hey, I'm kind of like you. I've always been a big comic guy, just as much as I've been a pro wrestling guy, and I'm just always going to be me.
Right.
And I think that's what people just got to start learning. Just be themselves, and you'll be okay.
Um, what is, you mentioned you have your podcast and it's been very successful. We've done this interview like in complete convoluted order, but it's good. How did the podcast itself get started?
COVID. I tell people all the
Same.
time. I tell people all the time, like, as bad as COVID is, I have COVID to thank for my podcast. I floated the idea around for years with my co-host, and it was just kind of like, well, what are you doing this weekend? Nothing. What are you doing? Nothing. Nothing's open. We can't go anywhere. We can't even sit down and eat dinner anywhere. We'll start a podcast. You want to go ahead and try this podcast thing out? Sure. Let's do it.
That's not my whole YouTube channel, but this was started as a result of COVID. Yep, absolutely. So I guess that's some good things that came out of COVID, huh?
Yeah, yeah. I told people, I said, COVID may have been the biggest hill in pro wrestling in 2020, but hey, it also allowed my life to slow down enough to where I could do some things I was passionate about. And it was the same with the book. I don't know if I find the time to get that book totally written the way I wanted it to if it wasn't for COVID, because a lot of the wrestlers weren't wrestling, and I
Right.
think they were looking for something to do.
Oh, very true. What are your goals with the podcast going forward? We're knock on wood out of the I don't think we're ever going to be completely out of COVID times, but we're at least out of that, like, shut down COVID time for right now. What are your goals going forward now that you have the podcast and the world's a little bit more open?
Well, I would love to be one of the top podcasts. I'm not sure it'll ever happen. I think that I probably needed to start it a few years earlier because there's such a strong market for that. There's such a lot of great strong podcasts, especially in pro wrestling. I love listening to a lot of them. But I just want the main goal is just to bring awareness to people that there is life outside of WWE, outside of AEW. And I want to bring some attention to some of these young talents that are coming through and that they the next 4 or 5 years could be in those major leagues.
Who are some of these talents that have done your show that you've connected with in your book, that you really connect with and you really feel like if you really want people to take notice of them?
Well, you've had her on the show on your show too, and we discussed it at NWA.
Yes.
I love Billy Starks.
Billy's great. That was just my fuck up. That to me makes that like my messing up in front of everybody moment, it feels like.
Yes, there's just something about knowing how young she is, how good she already is, and how dedicated she is
Absolutely.
that makes me believe that the sky's the limit. And I'm so happy for all the opportunities that she is getting. And I can't wait for 5 years down the road and someone finds out, oh, wait a minute, there's somebody wrote a book and it has a whole chapter of her in it. Wait a minute, let me go back and get that book. And then, another one right now that I'm not sure a lot of people know about. We had her on the podcast recently. Is Mia Friday? I think she's been down in towards Mission Pro Wrestling. She's another young talent. I think she's only 15 years of age. I think she's going to have a bright future. I would say Izzy, for anyone who knows NXT and knows about the Bailey girl, Izzy. She's been
Okay.
on our podcast as well, and she's training to be a pro wrestler. Now to me, she's already made it big. Her podcast is tremendous, and um, but then there's people like on the male side, and I really feel like we're in this time frame where it used to be really hard for women to make it, but now it's even harder for the men to make it. I love Gino Rivera. If anyone hasn't had him on the show, he recently just got a dark match against Keith Lee uh, last week, I think, on SmackDown. Uh, he is such a talent on the mic, and his character work is fantastic as well. I'd love to see great things from him. Nick Wayne, we haven't had him on the show yet. If people don't know about Nick Wayne, he's another one I can see great things from.
Very. You mentioned earlier you think it's harder for the men to make it nowadays. Why do you feel that way?
I, I really think it goes along with that whole aspect of no one is wanting to take a chance and be creative with their characters. I feel like there's so many people that are the exact same wrestler. Orange Cassidy, when I first saw him, I was thinking, this is so silly. This is never going to work. And boy, was I wrong. I think the men need to go back and start being creative. I don't think that they're just going to be going for every single person who's learning to wrestle with the high spots anymore. Whereas you're a girl, I think they are kind of looking for talent who can, they can mode and do something with. Elena Black is somebody, and Carmelo Hayes are two people right now that I think the world of in pro wrestling. And if you don't know who they are, they're Cora Jade and Carmelo Hayes. Christian Casanova, I'm sorry, is now Carmelo Hayes. And to see what WWE is doing with them too, because Elena's character is totally different than what she was on the Independence. I just think it's just so hard with Vince and what he's trying to do, and soon AEW is going to be overflatuated too with talent, and they're going to have to turn away some great people.
And that's all the more reason to support all the wrestling you possibly can. I'm not a big ROH fan anymore, but like, I don't want ROH to go out of business because that's a place for some of those names to go before they go to WWE or AEW. It's why I want Impact to succeed. It's why another sidebar, but like we see so much tribalism on the internet, and and you're welcome to criticize and be passionate, but you know, support independent wrestling, support all the wrestling you possibly can if it's there, because that's how people get work, and that's how people get better, and that's how you're able to, you know.
Yeah,
So,
unless your last name's Flair or Mysterio, or your father or something was a second generation, you've got to go on the independent scene. You've got to pay your dues. And people have to realize that all these people have started somewhere.
so
I don't know. I think some of these people just think that they just start in the WWE and they've never done anything else besides WWE, or they've never done nothing besides AEW. No, you know, Kenny Omega's been around for 15, 16 years.
yes.
And people, I watched Kenny Omega wrestle in Eldon, Missouri at a Harley race camp when he was trying out for Noah. And I thought to myself, man, he's like a Hardy Boy knockoff. Here we are 17 years later, and he's like the top wrestler in the world.
Yeah. And we just, I see so many. I'm not trying to gatekeep. I hope nobody listening to this takes this as gatekeeping, but if you have a local indie show, go. Don't don't say, well, it's not AEW, so it may not be that good, or it's not WWE, so it may not feel big time. Like, you don't know who you're gonna see.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't know who you're going to see. Uh,
I
and
saw I saw
I'll
some kid named Tyler Black in uh, uh, a Knights of Columbus Hall in O'Fallon, Illinois, and he's main evented and defeated Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania since then.
Yep, I went to University of Southern Illinois, or Southern Illinois
Carbondale.
University
Yep.
in Carbondale. Yes, the Ring of
SIU.
Honor show.
Yep.
Yes, and look at all that talent that was on that show. I
Adam
mean,
Cole.
Tommaso Ciampa was
Yes.
basically a nobody.
Tommaso Ciampa. Adam Cole. Mike Bennett.
Cedric Alexander was
Cedric
there.
Alexander was there.
Kevin Steen.
Was he on
Kevin
that one?
Owens.
I've seen Kevin Steen at shows. I can't remember if he was on the Carbondale show or
I'm
not.
pretty sure Adam Cole was on that.
Adam Cole may have been against ACH. I remember that one because ACH was big in the area in the St. Louis indie scene, so that was like mark out moment for us at that show. But yeah, I was at that show.
Small world. See,
Indeed.
we've been at more shows together than we knew.
Have you been to any of the other St. Louis ROH shows?
I have not. That was actually my only ROH show I've ever been to.
Really?
It's Carbondale.
Yeah,
yes.
St. Louis would kind of get one or two a year, and like we as like the St. Louis ROH fans would be like, "Isn't this great? This is amazing!" And then we'd be like sitting next to somebody that came down from Chicago, who came like to the big Ring of Honor show in Chicago, and was like, it's okay. And we're like, what? That's okay? That's Bryan Danielson. He's like, yeah, I just saw Bryan Danielson wrestle like Nigel McGuinness in a 5-star match last week. So like him in this tag match with Nigel McGuinness and Bryan, that's nothing. We're like, it kind of like, it was like a humbling experience for us in St. Louis because we were all like, this is exciting. We're finally getting a big show. And then they're like, yeah, no, you're not getting this is nothing compared to what Ring of Honor does elsewhere. But they've had some good ones come to St. Louis.
Have you been to an Impact or TNA show?
What era of Impact or TNA? Because I remember one of the first, not only like big wrestling shows, but just wrestling shows I'd been to was, it's like my third or fourth show ever was Lockdown 2007 in technically St. Charles, Missouri.
Okay. Yeah, see, the only Impact or TNA was when it was NWA TNA. When they used to have them down at Nashville, down at the fairgrounds. I've been twice to those, and we're talking AJ Styles was wrestling that show, and he was a nobody. And so, it's just, you're saying it over and over, and I am too. You got to support those local shows.
Absolutely. We to me the biggest success story through local wrestling I've seen. And I'm sure when we're done recording, I'll think of another one. But there was a group in Southern Illinois that would run, and I've had a lot of the wrestlers hell, my early podcasts were just memories of this promotion. AAPW had a gentleman by the name of Tommy Mercer, who was just a real big jack guy, cool as hell, that would just want to get a booking. He's from within driving distance, and he wanted a booking. And a few years later, there's this guy on Crimson getting called Crimson on TNA getting ready to wrestle Samoa Joe. And Crimson was Tommy Mercer. I got to see Tommy Mercer in my rival high school's basketball gym for the first time, and now he's got his own promotion, made it to TNA, wrestled a big name like Samoa Joe on a big pay per view for them. That to me is my big like. I saw this guy, saw this guy when he was really nothing. No knock on Mercer, but like when he was just doing that, and now he's a big deal. Seeing Tyler Black and Claudio Castagnoli, they had their buzz from Ring of Honor when I eventually saw him, but like that was my first exposure to like a ground floor guy that became a superstar. Do you have any stories like that?
Yeah. Mine's definitely Shawn Michaels. Like I
Fair enough.
said,
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah.
wrestling in my high school gym. And actually, that night, him and Marty Jannetty actually really got into a real life fight out in the parking lot. Some alcohol was involved,
Among
and
among other things, I'm sure with
among
Sean
other
and
things.
Marty.
And I remember everyone kind of watching it. And it's also the time I kind of learned about kayfabe. Was at that same show. There was a guy named Blackjack Funk, and he went out into the lobby and called his wife on the payphone and told her, he'd be home. And this was a monster heel, and he was like, "I love you." And I just remember looking at him like, "What?" And
they
so he
they
he
tell you to
noticed
get.
us watching him and screamed at us, and we all ran back to our seats.
I'm about to say they tell you fuck off, kids, or anything
Yeah,
like
yeah, that's
that.
exactly what he told us. We're like, "Oh, he's scared," and so took off running.
That's anybody from recent memory, because I mean you've got a lot of exposure to these ground floor folks. Anybody that I know. We talked about how Billy's on her way, and all those names. Is there anybody now that you've seen the finished product, you've seen them on AEW, or seen them, on the main roster that you're like, that was my guy or that was my girl?
Yeah, no, not really. I mean, there's a flux of people who I've watched on AEW Dark, and I know so many people get an opportunity on AEW Dark, uh, and for some people it may not be making it. But the first time that Alex Gracia, who's also in my book, made it to AEW Dark, I just felt a lot of pride because when you start talking to these men and women, and even on the podcast, you're not on my podcast just because I want you. You're on there because I'm really rooting for you.
Right.
And so when the see people make it, it's great. Same thing with the PWI 500 when it just released. To have so many guests that we've had be on that top 500, oh man, that's great.
Yeah. I think I know other people that do podcasting, and a few of them I have like some playful banter with, where they like to tease me, going like, we just interviewed Mick Foley and here you are with some nobody. But the difference is, it's like I'd love to interview Mick Foley or Kenny Omega or Shawn Michaels or Bret Hart or Tony Khan or Vince McMahon or Cody Rhodes or Triple H or anybody that'll I'm not going to say no, but you know I feel like you can relate to this more than because you've written a book about it. It's so fun. You may not be getting your name out there as much, but it feels so good to hear these stories and hear where these people come from and what drives them and where they're going. Um, with these independent folks, that's like, you know, I say this in due respect to, like, I'm just using Mick as an example. Then hearing like Mick Foley tell the Hell in a Cell story for the thousandth time.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And that's not me knocking Mick Foley or my friends for having Mick Foley on, but it's just, you know, For me personally, I get more reward out of that, and I don't know if do you feel the same way or?
Yeah, I mean, I've asked Mick Foley to be on the show. I've never gotten no response back from him. But there's, you're right. You know, we see on Twitter all these other podcasts and some of the guests that they're having. And if 5 people have the same person on within a month span, you know, it's not that I don't want that person on. I'll probably try to circle back and get them later, but I want somebody that no one maybe has not heard about yet either. Um, and that's the thing. There's thousands of wrestlers out there. There's enough wrestlers to go around for me and you and everybody. And if all anyone's ever done is wrestled in Indiana, then maybe their story's not as good as the person who's been wrestling in Florida and, you know, California and Arizona. So,
But also, the person who just wrestled in Indiana might have a really interesting story, and someone
yep,
from California might hear about this guy out of Indiana.
right. Oh, absolutely. You know, we've had people ask us where we're from, and we'll tell them, they're like, I would love to wrestle in Kentucky, but no one will book me in Kentucky, you know?
Right.
And I'm just like, well, let me try to see if I can't send you some names of some people you need to talk to. You
I,
know, if I can help somebody out, I'll try to help them out.
do you have a story of getting somebody booked that you take a lot of pride in?
I have not yet,
Okay.
um, but I think there's a possibility that somebody in my book who's located out west, I'll just say that, could be getting closer to the Midwest soon.
Okay. Awesome.
So, yeah.
Well, we could talk for another 10 hours about wrestling and stories, but like you said, we both have other projects and we both have families and lives and jobs and everything. So I'd love to have you back on if the opportunity presents itself.
Oh,
But
absolutely. I'll come on. We can talk comics. We can talk anything.
oh yeah, we gotta. There's a lot of stuff in mind that we can go off with this. It'll be a lot of fun. But real quick, you want to plug your podcast, plug your books, tell people where they can get it, where they can look you up. Just put yourself out there.
All right. As far as me, you can find me on Facebook at Ehren Schaffter. You can find me on Twitter at Shaft10. That's SCHAFFT 10. You can check out our Hot Tag Hooligans Wrestling podcast show over on YouTube and all listening audio platforms as well. Uh, get some merchandise at Pro Wrestling Tees of us as well. And as far as the books go, just head on over to Barnes and Nobles. You can get my book, Independent Road: A Wrestler's Journey, right now in hardcover and in paperback. And then in November 5th, you can get my new book, a children's novel for anyone out there who's got kids or just wants to read a feel good story. Loving Casey Nelson. You can get that starting November the 5th.
Awesome. So definitely check both of those out. Check out the Hot Tag Hooligans podcast. Buy the books because I know I need to buy the books, but that's gonna be that's a priority to especially the rest of the independent road book. I'm really interested in hearing just stories and
I tell you what, when we get off here, you give me your address and I will send you one this week.
I gotta pay for it. That's a book, man. I gotta pay for that. I'd like to. Going back to my original point, if you love something, you pay for it. You
All
always
right.
pay for it.
Everyone on here, I was being nice.
I know. I feel bad. I know you're struggling to, put your book out there. So I feel bad. I always feel bad taking free stuff from. I'll steal from WWE, but not this guy. um, but definitely interested in reading in that book, and definitely hope everybody else can too. And thank you everyone for listening. If you enjoyed, please like, comment, share. Content not just from wrestling, from all over the geek sphere, comic books, gaming, anime. I'm on social media, facebook.com/athleticgeeka9, Twitter athletic_geeka9, Instagram athleticgeeka9, and I'm on Patreon if you really want to waste money on something. Buy his book before you waste money on giving me a Patreon subscription. But thanks again, Ehren. If there's anything else you'd like to add?
No, sir. Appreciate the time tonight.
And thank you all for listening. Have a good one.